All right, and we are live. All right. So tonight's training is part 1 of 2 that we're going to be covering with the START system and START triage, going into a full triage scenario next month. Next month will not be recorded, as we're going to be doing a lot of tabletop exercises. This month here will kind of cover why we do MCI and why we do triage. Don't think of an MCI as a train crash with 300 patients, okay? Think of an MCI as a 3-car motor vehicle crash with 10 patients, right? An MCI is what? What is an MCI to you?
When our resources do not meet the needs of the situation.
Exactly. So people are afraid to say the word, oh my God, it's an MCI on the radio, right? Oh, if it's an MCI, we really can't declare this. Don't be afraid to say something like that on the radio and declare something if your resources are spent and you don't have enough resources to handle the current situation that you have. So with that comes the system. We're also going to cover incident management from the EMS perspective, and we're going to review the triage, and then we're going to practice the START triage system, which is the handout that I passed out to you guys today. Okay.
No, I just.
All right. So, what is the goal of MCI management?
Do the greatest good for the greatest amount.
Right. Do the greatest good, do the greatest amount that we have. Right. As you can see here, to save the largest number of survivors from a multiple casualty incident. That is our goal. Now, I'm sure that we've had our share of MCIs here on Route 7. You've been here a lot longer than I have, Rob, so I'm sure you can probably attest to some of that.
Nothing major, some 4 or 5 patients, but nothing.
Yeah.
You know.
I can bring up a situation where I was incident command of a motor vehicle crash. We had 10 patients, 4 cars that spread over 200 yards down Route 202 in Lebanon, Maine, where I had taken command of that incident with fire. We ran a unified command through the whole incident. We had 10 total patient transports, multiple ambulances on scene, things like that. So with extrication, it just spread out like a crazy mess. We declared an MCI because we didn't have enough resources. Therefore, we're not being judged for abandoning patients. We go from one patient to the next, to the next, to the next in triage, where we needed to put our paramedics coming in versus EMTs versus advanced EMTs, and where the patient was needed the most, so for as far as patient care. And that was a long night. It was on Christmas night, and it just took a lot of resources. We ended up having 8 ambulances come in. Some transported 2, but we had ambulances coming from all over the place. So it was quite an incident. So what is an MCI scene? As you can see here, right? The ambulance kind of rolled over. There's another picture here. Any one of these can be an MCI type scene. Can this happen in Charlotte, the train derailment? Right? We have passenger trains that come through here. I don't know the capacity of what's on there, but I do know they come through. Or if we have total destruction of building collapses and things like that. So what are some common things affecting your MCI response? This class has a lot of class participation. What are some things that hinder your MCI responses?
Not enough vehicles or
response times?
not enough certified providers.
Okay, not enough certified providers.
Scene safety.
Scene safety. Anything else?
I don't know what the certification are coming in.
Right, what the level they have, right? So look at this, typical staffing of your ambulance service. What's our typical staffing here?
2 to 3.
You're guaranteed 2, right? We're always staffed with 2 people. During the daytime, we have Rob here during the day for a third of the firefighter, for the rescue truck or the engine or whatever. But that's what we have on a guaranteed basis. Other than that, we supplement with volunteers. You may or may not get the second ambulance out the door depending on who's coming in. So we have that there. What about Shelburne? What about for Gens? So what are their staffing levels? Where is the next closest ambulance that needs to come in? You know, these are things we need to start thinking about that might hinder where our staffing is. Who's strictly a volunteer service versus a paid service, paid staff? Other one would be, what does EMS routinely do on a daily basis? Are they have other calls? Okay. Hopefully they're not napping during the day. Yeah, but things we need to look at. What does EMS routinely do? What about transfer services, right? So I'm going to throw this out there. Could Lamoille, a transfer service, be at use for an MCI?
Sure.
I would use them. You know, if we need multiple ambulances, private sector services can provide multiple ambulances, most likely, if needed. How do you?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have an MCI, a big MCI, and you're pulling in ambulances from all over the place, what happens to, when they have calls in their service area when nobody's there?
They should be backfilling as they come closer. They should be calling in station coverage and backfilling.
So they do that.
I cannot speak for that. I know some places, and like I said, I'm still learning the area and how things work here. But some towns or different districts have ambulance task force. Do they have that up here, Rob? We can say so. When I worked as an EMS coordinator in Berwick, I could say, give me a first alarm MCI or a second alarm MCI. And what that does is it strikes out an ambulance task force that comes in with multiple ambulances in different areas. And it's all laid out in the matrix. So that may be something that could work here if Rob were to get on scene of an MCI and say, I have 10 patients. This could indicate a first alarm MCI. Strike a first alarm MCI. And they now automatically bring in ambulances from these different areas. That's a possibility. But for now, we basically request things as we go. Thank you, Tony, for the reply. Any incident that task local resources. I will keep this up here in case you don't get some feedback.
I have a question. So we had a call in Bridport for Virgins. We were called in as being delayed possibility of 7 patients. We took several patients in one ambulance.
Is that bad?
I was just wondering, can you do that in some circumstances?
As long as they have a way to be secured safely.
Okay.
You know, if you have a bunch of greens and you're transporting, that works perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Just make sure you have enough resources in the ambulance safely seated to treat the patients that are in the truck. That's going to be one of the biggest things. There's nothing saying that if you have, say, 100 patients, that you can't take a school bus and put 40 patients in that are greens and bring them to a hospital. It's an MCI. So some rules change versus a normal EMS system. Things to think about. So how would you handle the following? 4 victims, 2-car head-on crash. I know Rob's way of thinking here. Tony wants me to mention you should never transport 2 reds in the same rig.
We did 2 yellows.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. I should just put you on speakerphone so you can add in on this. Why don't you call my phone and I'll put you in on this way. Somebody calls in. Turn the volume up. Okay, Tony, you're on speakerphone now. This is a lot easier. Fair enough. So let me ask this. I'm pretty sure Rob can give me a pretty good answer how this is going to work. But let me ask Matt. If you were first on scene, you have 4 victims, 2-car head-on. How would you handle it?
Well, gotta check all 4 victims quickly. Just do rapid assessment with breathing and ABCs and triage.
That is really loud.
I just did it on my computers.
Okay. I'll put you on the other side. All right. Anything you want to add to that, Rob?
Assess scene safety first.
Yeah.
Or block off the scene, the 2-car head on. I'm gonna block off Route 7 altogether.
And we're going to shut it down and we're going to start doing his evaluation and see what he needs for resources. Does he need another heavy rescue? Does he need more ambulances? There's some things to think about when you're first on scene. What do you need for the resources at hand? Get them coming. If you need to call for 5 ambulances, then call for 5 ambulances. At least you can do is turn them around if you don't need them, right? At least they're on the way. So that they're thinking about it as a command point of view. Let me give you the next one here. How about team van, 17 victims? What are we going to do at this point?
I'm going to go in the van and see who's ambulatory and walk out of there and,
Okay.
and rapid assessment.
Triage.
Triage.
Start triaging.
According to the new protocol with the the NIMS is that you stand in one spot and you holler anybody that can hear me that can walk to me.
And that works
Lower
really
my
well.
voice and come here.
It really does.
Come here.
I can hear that.
So the new start triage is the first thing that you do is you go to a safe place where you can see the whole incident and you yell as loud as you can. If anybody can hear me, you can walk to me. Please walk to me now.
Because if they
But
can
what you
walk,
got to do is you got to have somebody there to corral those folks and put them in a certain zone.
correct.
Because that will bite you in the ass. Excuse me, it'll bite you.
So what if you're there alone then? You work with them.
Then you try to corral them and you wait till your other resources get there.
Do you deal with anything else?
If
I guess.
now what you can do is you can find one person there that you think might be of sound mind and you can tell them, hey, keep these people here. I'm going to go out and start doing more assessment.
Yeah, and then a lot of times people will step up in a situation like that to help out.
Right.
But pick a location, maybe at the front of your vehicle, your personal vehicle. Go stand over there, or stand in the front of, I would say, front of Rescue 3. You need the tools out the front of that. But I would stand in front of that engine over there. Just kind of find a place for them to go initially. We can move them afterwards, but once we set up our areas, we're green or yellow or red.
Something to think about too is in this district, assuming no ambulances are out on other calls already, the maximum number you're going to get for a certain spot at any time is 8 ambulances. Like I said, assuming
But no one's out.
no one's out.
Should we have to reach out to different districts? But that's what dispatch is also for, to help assist you with that.
Right. We don't dictate who comes. We just say, I need 5 ambulances.
And they're going to start dispatching ambulances as they go.
Just like we did at the hazmat incident at the school. I need 5 ambulances. I've got 5 patients, and I left it up to dispatch.
And let them handle it. Take the burden off the incident commander. That's what dispatch is for. The one you shouldn't have to think about, well, I need one from Shelburne. Who else is out there? I have other things to worry about.
You don't
Dispatch,
know
5 trucks,
you don't know what their availabilities are, so just put it all on dispatch.
and things like that. Realistic, right? 43 victims, school bus, rollover. Could that happen? Yeah. Same thing. We're going to go through the motions. We're going to start doing the assessing. The difference with the school buses is now you're dealing with minors. So it makes little things a little bit more difficult. And then out here. Is that a possibility? We have the tracks, we have the trains that are there. Right?
We don't have commuter trains.
Every now and then the Green Mountain
The Champlain Flyer.
Champlain Flyer comes through. They're looking at setting up another commuter track from Rutland up through.
So the potential will be there. As we all know, there's a lot of potential of something else on the tracks are over here too.
Wilson Amtrak. Let's look at that one.
All right. Really, the end all be all is you need to make sure you have good coordination, and you got to make sure you have good resources that are out there, right? And we should all know what resources we have available to us.
The other thing to think about is this: is if you are the first one there and you start utilizing other people, think about who you're utilizing in those positions, because that can either make it or break the incident.
Yep.
Don't just pick the first EMT that comes up and says, okay, you're now primary triage, because it may not work so well for you.
Right.
Don't be afraid to overlook somebody that, I just met you, but I know you've not, 10 years from now, I want you to be so-and-so.
Right.
So just keep that in mind for an MCI. So.
And then kind of going with the MCI, and we'll talk a little bit about resources and placement. If you are VIC, think about apparatus placement as well. And the last thing you want is all your ambulances around the vehicle when you really need the heavy rescue right there to start working and cutting. And I know some cities that I've worked for in the past, they show up in a ladder truck with extrications. They don't have heavy rescues. And that's a lot of truck to put in a small incident. So, all right. So what do you have to think about? All these different things start popping up, right? Because you're in charge of this stuff here, and we need to figure out how we're going to treat resources, command, triage, staging, communication, safety, assessment. Holy crap, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about, right? This is why when more resources show up, we start delegating different positions as we go. And really, the initial problem on scene is that we have a lot of casualties, right? with limited resources. Well, our goal or the objective is to achieve balance. Okay, so we really want to look for casualties and resources really should be here. And we need to work our way to getting it so we have enough resources to be able to handle what we have currently on scene. But we mentioned how people were trained. Rob did, I think you mentioned a little bit about that too, Pam, as well, on the training levels. ALS versus BLS. What can they do? What can a paramedic do? What can an advanced do? What can an EMT do? What can an EMR do? You should be familiar with those levels, especially being the person in charge or command of the MCI, to be able to delegate your resources. So one thing that I've always said, Tony, you have some weird things coming out of that phone. One of the things I've always said is the last person you want on triage is a medic.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because
Why?
the medic with a priority one patients. Yeah.
Because the medics can overthink everything and want to treat. Because a medic can do decompression, they can pray, they can do whatever, they can do IVs, they can do multiple advanced treatments that we're going to want to do to that patient. BLS can't do that.
When you say somebody's priority one, you need them available to treat those
Exactly.
individuals.
But they're also, BLS is not going to think ALS, right? They're going to think BLS and do what that chart is that I gave you. That's the way they're going to follow things. Very simple, easy, airway, breathing, circulation. Oh, they're dead, plaque tag, move on. Okay, that's what we're going to look at things. How about this here? What do they have for specific training? Well, you know that paramedics have ACLS. I threw pediatric assessment in there and pediatric advanced life support. Well, CPR. Is everybody here CPR certified?
Yes.
Which we want, yes. That's a requirement for us. But do all fire departments require CPR for every member?
I don't believe so.
Right? Is it a requirement for fire 1 and 2 though? Yes. They're required to have CPR and first aid. But if they're not fire 1 or not fire 2 pro board certified, they may not have it. They may not have CPR. They may not have first aid, and it may not be a requirement for the members coming on board. Something to think about. Have they had any specialized training, like pre-hospital trauma life support? Those are other classes additional to your normal training to help treat traumatic injuries. It's additional training. The difference between different levels, we covered that already. And then how many patients in class, how many patients are you taught to treat at one time? And so we'll go back to your EMT class now. How many patients were you taught how to treat? One. And when it came to the MCI chapter, how quick was it? It was a very quick blurb with very minimal MCI training. They don't teach that in EMT school. Okay? It's not something it's part of the curriculum, but not something hit heavy on. Jim has been working on assessing for the last couple of weeks to pass his test, right? Single patient. He's never taught you the multiple patient deal. Okay? So think about that when people come on board, like Rob said, you're a brand new EMT, probably shouldn't be doing triage. Maybe someone that has more experience coming on board. Maybe the one that might be best fit for that position. Something to think about. So what changes when you have an MCI? Well, what are your resources? Who's a patient? Do you have a major accident? How many onlookers are going to stop and take pictures and look around? Who's a patient? How many of you? What, Tony?
What's that, Kevin?
What'd you say?
I didn't say anything.
Okay. All right.
He's talking to his cats.
Yeah. All right. The thing is, though, is who is the patient now? I mean, we've been on scenes before where we said, okay, we had like 15 people standing around the vehicle. Only 3 were involved. Right? So we need to decipher who is a patient, who is not. If you're not a patient, go over there.
So what kind of sign-offs work and stuff for that kind of thing?
Non-existent.
Non-existent.
Really?
You don't even do a state form on it.
It's an MCI. Now, if you transport, you do a state form. Any patients that are transported, obviously that state form is done.
So like you don't need a 1090. Is it 1093?
1099.
I call it a patient refusal form, but it is a
It's not
1093.
very- Yeah.
I call it a patient refusal form because I hate 10 codes. So, no, I'm not worried about patient refusals at that point. Now, if we have 8 patients then yes, at that point in time, we're gonna do refusals and things like that. But if we have 300 patients, there's no way that's gonna happen at all. Point being, I was working in Maine. We had a train accident where the Amtrak was coming through an intersection, and a dump truck decided they wanted to go around the gates, and they hit the dump truck. The guy died. I think the train conductor died as well. We had 100 patients that day. We had close to 60 ambulances on scene. I was one of the first ones to transport out, and mine had a significant head trauma. We only had 6 transports out of the whole thing. The rest of them were all greens. We had 6 transports out of 100 patients. That was over in North Berwick. If you want to look it up on Google and see it, it was in North Berwick, Maine. A train derailment from a collision with a dump truck. So things to think about: who is a patient and who is not. What patients do you treat first? Rob put together a very, very good MCI training in Moncton. It was a well set up day. Unfortunately, there wasn't many people over there for EMS, but I had fun. I had fun triaging people. It was great. I haven't done that in a long time. So we don't do a lot of it. We don't do enough of it.
We have one plan for here. We just haven't got it all laid out yet.
Who can be salvaged? Who can keep alive? Remember, you are the one that has to make that determination to put that black tag on somebody. If they're expected to die, they're going to die eventually. You got a black tag on them and move on. Right? You've got to make that decision as a provider.
Well, now it's great.
But now it's gray.
Yeah,
That's
right.
the new tag system now has gray, which is expected. So if you're bleeding out and you're just not looking good, it's low blood pressure, let's say airways compromised, and you're expected to die, here's a gray tag, move on.
What would you do with gray?
Was that gray is between black and red?
Yeah.
It's called expected.
It's called expected, something that's new.
Used to be just the 4 colors of black.
Right.
Your black is still dead.
They were having a hard time putting
No,
black
yeah,
on patients
gray.
that still had a pulse.
So they had a hard time going from green to red to black. So they now created this other color gray called expected.
And who gets transported first?
Red.
Red
Red or
patients.
yellow. Yeah.
Maybe yellow, depending on the type of extra patient you have.
Mm-hmm.
And who needs trauma and specialty care? And this is an important thing, because I'm going to throw this back at all of you. How many patients can UVM handle? Let's say you got a school bus, 42 patients on board, and you're expected 30 of those patients to be transported, let's say.
I bet they can only probably take 10 or 15.
What you're going to do is have dispatch call the facilities and say, an MCI in Charlotte, this is what we have based on your transport officer, how many reds, how many yellows, how many greens. And they're going to say, we can handle 6 reds, 2 yellows, 1 green. That's what UVM can handle. Perfect, I know they can handle that. Porter, what can you handle? Okay. Everybody's laughing now.
Yeah.
But what can you handle? We can handle 1 yellow and 5 greens. Okay, fine. I know I can send them that way. Try to send your greens to the far out hospitals.
So,
Keep your local centers for your yellows and
so
reds.
then what's the next one? Government?
What's the other one? Is it?
There's Northwest.
Or
There's no,
really,
yeah,
I
up
guess
and,
Northwest.
no.
What was that, Tony?
You're going over near Central Vermont? Is that
Yeah,
Yeah.
hospital.
the next rep from UVM, right?
So that's another thing we need to think about is what the hospitals can handle. Because the last thing you want to do is not notify the hospitals of MCI and show up with 20 patients and say, by the way, we're sending you 15 reds. Or they're like, we can't handle this. It's not going to happen. We cannot handle this many patients right now at this point in time. Right? So, what are some other methods at this point? Air medical transport. They can take reds to Dartmouth. They can take reds to maybe Albany. I'm not sure what else number 1 trauma centers. But they can go by air. And rather than mention, they're also bringing products that we do not carry as paramedics. They bring blood. Something to think about too.
So LifeNet came to visit Regents in their training, and they said they can get almost a dozen helicopters if need be.
They run on a system.
Yeah.
between Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and obviously, and then New York. So there's in Connecticut. They run on. I'm not sure what the name of the system is, but they all are affiliated with one flight program, I believe, and that's how they all work together. So there's opportunities.
You give you a time frame on that one, Andy?
45 minutes.
45 minutes, so you can get 12 helicopters.
Yeah.
I don't think they get all 12 here in 45 minutes.
Yeah, that was. I mean,
I'm
that's
sure
for a
organization
different area.
and everything
Yeah.
else. And you have Boston Med Flight. They have like 4 or 5 helicopters down there. Maine's got 3. Dartmouth has 2. Then the other ones out.
LifeNet and Ticonderoga has 2 or 3.
So the things to think about, that's another method of transporting red patients. Just throwing that out there, and they also come with different products like blood products that can help save a life. So just throwing that out there as an option.
That brings up a whole other issue there. LZ,
That's right.
more personnel.
Again, if you don't have personnel to land, they'll find a place to land on their own if they need me. And the good thing about us out here for driving around is a lot of open fields. So that does help. If you're from a more wooded area, it makes it harder to find places to land. And usually you want to find designated zones for them. But out here, they have a lot of places they can land near roads, which makes things a lot more helpful. And another option that's not out of the question is, what about health net? Still an option. If it's an MCI, I'm sure they'll send them. So think about that. And another thing to add to here is who can help care for others. If you have, like Rob mentioned, if you have someone who's capable in the green that can help other greens out, that works really well, right? If someone has a broken arm, the other person, here, why don't you hold this for them? Hold their arm for them to help them out. You can utilize it for people to help each other out as long as they're not taking off and leaving. So we need to still be accountable for everybody that's in that MCI. All right. Remember that time is important, okay? And then the arrival of the requested resources that are there. Time is a factor with all this kind of stuff, so we need to make sure we're planning ahead early. That's why I was mentioning earlier that some places offer first, second, third, or fourth alarm MCI assignments. And we don't do that here, but we just asked dispatch, like Robin mentioned earlier, to say we need 6 trucks. They're going to send us 6 ambulances. So remember the golden hour is getting a patient within 60 minutes from the time of injury to reach definitive surgical care. So who can handle surgical care? UVM. Can Porter do anything surgical?
Wow.
Probably minor stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with Porter Hospital, what they actually can do there.
Depends if they have ortho on or not.
Right. But they can be called in
Yeah.
on bigger incidents. So think about what they can handle for surgical care and what kind of surgery is going to be provided and send them to the right facilities. And this is where getting on the phone and talking to Med Control and saying, hey, this is what I got for surgical patients and this, can you handle it? Things like that. So really, it's really a balancing act between resource management versus the golden hour. There's really a balancing act between the two. As you can see here. Right? So remember, managing them plus the time in the golden hour equal, Tony, you're making a lot of noise.
No, it's your feedback.
Okay. So casualty resources being equal plus the golden hour time will equal maximum survivors. That's what we're looking for. Everything has to fit into a puzzle, into one big picture that we have to be able to treat these patients. All right. So scene management's a big one. If the scene is like this, and definitive care is here, we have to worry about time. How long is it going to take us to get from the scene to here to the definitive care, right? We have to think about travel distances and everything else. Right? You get a call out in the middle of, Tony, where do you live, in Bridport? If you get a call out there, where's your closest definitive care? UVM. You know what
I think we should take it to Porter, but Porter is limited to what they do, so any major trauma,
I think it's him.
Yeah, you got a lot of feedback in your end, Tony. Right, a lot of the factors that come into play as well. We need to make sure we have command set up. We have to establish some safety zones, right? Safety officer, safety zones. We have to think about doing our assessments. We got to get communication involved. We need to have good management. We need to start our triage, primary and secondary. We need to have a treatment area. We need to figure out how we're going to transport, where our transport areas are going to be. Are we going to have 20 ambulances showing up? Do we really want them all at scene all at once? Do we need to have secondary staging versus primary staging? Do we have to have different staging areas? And if one depletes, we bring some more from secondary to primary. These are all different things you need to think about and how we're going to set up our area. Or are we fortunate enough to have a huge field, we can park 100 ambulances out there? It all depends on what you have, where you find the scene, and where patients are going to be transported from. You really got to think about that. Remember, we have to have EMS operations that falls underneath fire command. All right, so we got to be sure we're all working together. Someone has to oversee the EMS ops. They'll work with fire command to let them know what needs are going to be needed for the triage, treatment, and transport. And command worries about safety, assessment, and communications. Now, if you have multiple ambulances coming in, how can you talk to all of them?
Year one.
Through the transport, the transport coordinator would coordinate with them all on a county channel, most likely.
But if command has them coming in, you might not be able to hear me at all from here. If command has them coming in, though, he needs to be able to communicate with the ambulances coming in, right? So is there a specific channel they can all change to? Do they have a frequency? You know? So that could be a communication breakdown if they don't have the frequencies available to them. I know that New Hampshire got a statewide grant for radios for all services. And they have a specific bank designed just for these types of incidents they can switch to. But
We got VTAC and VCall.
Yeah. So everybody's radio in New Hampshire on an ambulance and fire trucks are all the same. Same frequencies, same banks, everything. They have 2 programmable banks they can do on their own, and everything else is programmed by the state and said you have to have these frequencies for interoperability. That's what they're looking for. So something to think about as well. Can you communicate? So we talk about command, well, we need to know who is in charge, right? So when you get on the scene, establish command, so at least we know what it is. So if Rob gets on the scene and says, Sean C2 is on scene, establishing Route 7 command. I know when I'm showing up that I'm going to be talking to him for an order or an assignment when I show up on scene.
Until I delegate somebody else.
Right, until someone else gets delegated to take over. But at that point in time, it'll be made known of who's taking over at that point. Then we have to figure out who's in charge of what. Well, Rob can't be commander of the incident. He can't be triage officer, secondary, safety. He can't do all that all by himself. So he's going to have to delegate different assignments to different people as they come through. And that's where your wonderful vest that people don't ever wear, that tell you on the back command, all that kind of stuff, incident commanders, all that, triage, transport. Those are where those vests come into play because we know who is what and in charge of what. Who is going to do what? Who else needs to be there? All right. The one thing I can't stand is freelancers. So everybody needs to have a task assigned. Right? If you don't, they go to staging. If we need someone else, we'll bring them in for a company. That's the way we need to work things every single time. We can't just freelance around trying to find a job to do, right? Especially at an MCI, because you may be needed somewhere else. EMS is generally in operations. EMS is not going to take command of the whole situation. They're going to be ops, right? They're going to be functioning, working on treatment, transport, and things like that. They're going to report to command. If I say as an EMS operations officer, I come in, I establish EMS operations under Rob's command. I say, Rob, we need more ambulances. He's going to make that request, something I don't have to do. So we're going to have to work together for that. We're going to think about safety. Is there a hazard or threat? What hit what? Who hit what? Should you really be here? That's something to think about. If you have a propane leak, let's say a propane truck hits a school bus, all right? Everything's downwind, downhill. Should we really be down here congregating, or should we really be up here, right? Go back to hazmat, what's higher, heavier, and lighter than air. And think about the specific gravities of the different materials. These are all things you need to think about is where we're in a stage stuff and where should we really be in that type of situation? Should we actually be at that incident at that point in time? If I show up and I look over and I see a green glow in the sky, I'm probably not going to go anywhere near that incident. Binoculars are coming out from the ambulance. I'm going to take a look. That's bad. I'm still covered with a thumb. Should you be here? Are you protected? Right? Who in here can wear an air pack? Rob's hand will go up. That's my hand up. Anyone else wear an air pack? You can, Nick? Other than that, no one else is protected depending on what situation you're going into. So think, are you protected? What should you worry about? Keep thinking this over and over again. So look at assessments. So really know what is going on, how big is this, and how many people we have. I know this sounds redundant, but what I want you to understand is these are important factors we're going to look at for an MCI. So what's going on? Don't just start walking up, go to the first vehicle and start assessing. Step back, take a look. What do you have in front of you? Okay? Because a lot of times we'll get tunnel vision and go to the first car, or the two cars here. But what you didn't notice 50 yards down the road, there's another car that rolled over. Right? People miss things like that if they're tunnel visioned on that certain situation. Take a look around. Look up. Right? Look down. Look around, everything. Right? Well, my friend was in the car, but I'm not sure where he is. I don't know what happened. Did you look up in the tree, 20 feet up, and he's hanging from a branch? Because the vehicle rolled, he was surrounding the vehicle. Look everywhere. Right? You don't know what you're going to find until you get there and actually do a good scene survey. Look around. What do you need? And how does what I do affect others? And what are they doing that can affect me? As far as communications go, who needs to know? And what do they need to know?
Hospitals.
Okay? When you give your size up, is it short and sweet, or is it a whole paragraph? Right? We've all heard the paragraph size ups. Or is it short and sweet? 2-car MVA, multiple patients. Assessing further. Dispatch started declaring an MCI. We have 6 patients. Started 5 ambulances. Keep it simple, because there's a lot of radio traffic going on. And remember, they're not just dispatching our scene. Okay? They're dispatching other agencies as well for other calls, especially when they go to a county-based dispatch center, right, or district, or whatever you want to call it. We're not just going to be dispatching for Charlotte. They're going to have Burlington, South Burlington, all these different services will be in this community dispatch. So it's not just us. So keep radio traffic low. Do communications on TAC channels. That's what they're there for. Does command and ops know what's going on? It's probably a good idea to pass it along to your officers on what's going to be happening here. And do the other players know what's going on? Right? Something to think about. All right, so triage. Who is doing it? Where are they doing this? And what are they finding? We need to know what they're finding for red, yellow, gray, black, green, and things like that. And as far as treatment goes, what do you come preloaded with when you show up?
Tourniquet,
You have one in your pocket right now? No?
gloves.
Right. Megan, you guys are on duty tonight, right?
Yeah.
What do you have in your pockets right now? Do you have a tourniquet?
Nope.
You have gloves? Nope. So you're not ready. Right. No, but what does a typical EMS provider come preloaded with? Well, I look at it as 2 ways. There's the experienced provider, and there's the brand new provider. The brand new provider always has the trauma shears taped and everything else ready to go, and their pants are laid down. The experienced provider has nothing to say, I brought your shears. That's the way it works.
All right.
Am I wrong?
That's true.
The more you do, the more you realize you don't want on your gear anymore. All right. So, but what do you come preloaded with? What do you have in your first in bag?
Airway management, bandaging.
Okay. But looking at that as a whole, what do we do? Do we need a first in bag? No. That's not what triage is about. We're not treating patients. We're triaging them. Right? That's what we're looking for. How to organize it, how much can we do for the patient? And we're going to talk about that when we go through our scenarios. As far as transport goes,
Kevin, that's where
We go back a little bit?
Back to triage, like I said, that can make or break an incident.
Yeah.
Because, and the few that I've been involved with, the triage takes way too long, and everybody's triaging. You gotta put the 2 or 3 people out there triaging, depending on the number of patients or victims. You gotta start putting people in other places. You have to, because what happens is if you don't, you got patients coming to you as the incident commander or EMS control, and nobody to take them from you.
Yeah.
That's critical right there.
The last thing you want is to overwhelm the patients who need to handle a scene.
Right, I mean, when I was thinking when you asked what does the typical provider come preloaded, I was thinking the mindset of wanting to spend some time and do an assessment, that's what they're getting preloaded with. And what they have to do is they cut that down.
I agree. That's why I said the last thing you want is have a paramedic doing triage.
Right.
We come preloaded with a lot more knowledge base than the ENT does. So you want that ENT going in there and doing the triage, because they're going to stick to the basics. We're going to stick to a higher assessment. Okay, save us for the critical patients.
And what actions can you do as a triage individual? What should you be doing?
As a medic or as an ENT or in general?
ABC.
As a
ABCs.
If you're assigned triage, what is it you can do as a triage officer?
Oh.
Open an airway.
Open an airway.
That's it.
Maybe stop critical bleeding if you can see it, and you can do it right
Have
then
them
and there.
hold it themselves.
Have
That's
them
all they
hold
can
it
do.
themselves. They put a tourniquet on.
Isn't there something like if it's a child, you actually can give some breath, or you want to give breath?
It depends on the situation.
And how many patients?
And but the thing is, how long does that take for each patient? You shouldn't be at a patient for more than a minute if you're triaging.
So what you're doing is you're following this. That's your triage. They're there.
Well, also the patients can provide treatment for themselves as well, and that also helps them a little psychologically, knowing that they're able to control the situation themselves a little bit.
That's why that start triage works very well. By the first thing you do is say, if anybody can get up and walk, come to me, because that takes out probably 75% of your patients.
Right.
And your triage became much simpler at that point.
Go back one here. All right, so C management, transport. Well, who's in charge of transport? Someone has to be designated that position, the transport officer, right? From where are they doing this? Where are we going to set them up?
It's his call.
Right? Hopefully not next to the scene itself. Let's put them in a different area, bring patients to them. Remember, there's multiple patients coming in. So as a transport officer, I also got to think about how the ambulance is going to come in, how they're going to come back out.
Well, before we have the transport, we got to figure out treatment area.
Right, we need to put a treatment area as well.
You got to do that before you get
Right.
to transport.
You know, we got to set up, greens to be over here. Remember, greens can help you take reds too. If you have a big incident like that, they can help carry people. Utilize green if need be. Okay, utilize the resources that you have until more manpower shows up. Just because they're EMS and patients are injured doesn't mean that a firefighter who has no EMS background can't pick somebody up and walk them or carry a backboard, things like that. It can happen. One thing that we can also utilize as well that kind of uses resources is Middlebury EMS has an MCI trailer that can be utilized.
I believe BFD still has one as well.
Does the hospital have anything?
Yeah, it's over at Station 4, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
They've moved things around, but I think they still have an MCI trailer for 50 patients.
Now, I know they say that we don't backboard patients, right? But we're not backboarding anybody. We're using them as devices to move somebody. Okay? So utilization of those can definitely be handy. Something to think about. And how many patients are going where? Once again, hospitals have to be notified before you start transporting. They need to know what they can handle. Last thing you want to do is overload a hospital. The patients are not going to get good care. All right. Large-scale triage is the hardest job anyone in pre-hospital care will ever do. Okay? So when do we triage? When casualties exceed the number of skilled resources or rescuers. All right? We start triage. How many patients do we have? How many cars did that incident we did in Moncton?
It was 6 or 7.
6 or 7 cars?
13 or 14 patients.
Yeah.
With some mannequins.
How long ago was that?
I've done it actually twice over there in the last 2 years.
Oh, it was a training?
Yeah, training exercise.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, what happens in Moncton?
One car was on fire
Had one car on fire, we had motorcycle involved, we had trucks rolled over.
Motorcycle pinned underneath the vehicle, body parts everywhere.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was a well thought out training, and Rock did a good job with the cue cards in the vehicle. It was a great opportunity for a new EMT to see that. So we went around and said, yep, red, yellow. We went down through, did our assessment. We had 5 people in vehicles, and obviously in safer areas. That had a card they would show like this. It was well thought out. That was a great opportunity for someone to go around and actually do the good triage. I mean, we were pretty close from what I gave what you had written down. I think we were pretty close. And
Yeah, I think it was.
A couple ones that were off. But,
Yeah, it didn't make a difference, much of a difference. But
Yeah.
we were close.
and I think I had 2 from Bristol that were with me.
Yeah, Bristol or Monkey first responder.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So, all right. So types of triage, obviously primary, which is on scene prior to movement. We want to go around and get a primary triage of everybody. Then our secondary triage is incident dependent, probably prior or during transport. The reason why they went to the START system versus the old triage tags is, believe it or not, patients do get better. So if you have a patient who's a red, they can become a yellow. And you can't add things back on with the old system. Once it's ripped off, it's ripped off. At least with the START system, you can flip the colors around. Patients do actually get better during treatment. So they can be upgraded, or they can be downgraded.
And get worse.
They can get worse. So things to think about when you're looking at your secondary triage. That's what the secondary triage is for, is to do more of an assessment and then determine where this patient's going to go. My quick assessment may have been a yellow, but your secondary triage, it may become a red at that point. So that's what we're looking at. So coding, we talked about this right here. This right here, as you see, they have a priority 1 patient coming out. That's a red tag. So obviously red, then there's yellow priority 2, green's priority 3, and then obviously priority 4. And this system here is black, which is obviously dead or expected to die. And with the new systems that are out, gray is your expected. What you can say. Or 0. Let me do color system here. As far as tags go, look at the improvement with the new system, like I said, is you actually have an opportunity to make a patient better versus worse. So that's one of the newer parts of the systems that are there. Not much of that's really different. This is your START triage protocol here. As far as how this works, we have the triage flow chart on the reverse should only be used for an adult only. For pediatric triage, 0 to 10, use the SMART pediatric triage tape. I don't have a tape present. I'll try to see if I can find one in my training kit that I have somewhere else at home. Bring in one of those. So, but here we can actually put down what we have for numbers. So as you can see here, it says cross the next number for each row as you find a new casualty. So you can check off how many reds, how many yellows, how many greens we have, how many dead people we have.
How does that work again now?
This side here, the numbers you see are how many patients you have with that color code. Okay. And then obviously we have the system, which is what I passed out in front of you today. Okay. So what we're going to do here in a second is we're going to go through different scenarios. And you guys are going to tell me, based on your chart, of what color they're going to be. This is all leading to part 2, which is next month, where we actually do a tabletop exercise with little cutout people. We're going to have different scenarios. We're going to go around here and triage people as you go through different areas of the room. So that'll be next month. So we're going to go through the system really quick. For primary triage, the first attempt of balancing EMS resources and casualties or injuries for the injured. If they are walking, if it's yes, it's a green. They are green if they can walk. All right? Now follow through with your charts. This is what you guys are going to see in here. All right? If they cannot walk and they have no respirations, reposition the airway. Okay? If then they still have no respirations, they are coded black. They are dead. Everybody understand that?
Say that again.
Okay. So if the patient is not walking,
Right.
they have no respirations, do a reposition of the airway. If you reposition it and there are still no respirations,
Okay. I think you
they are now black.
I think you said something different.
Fair enough. All right. If they have respirations after the reposition, they become a red. Okay? Now we'll start from the top again to the next one. If they are not walking and they have respirations under 30 minutes,
Under 30 per minute.
under 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you for correcting me on that. Under 30 a minute. If they're not, then it's a priority 1. Okay? If they have it, check cap refill. If the cap refill is over 2 seconds, control any bleeding, make them a priority 1. All right? That's how you do the circulatory check. If you're unable to obtain cap refill, check a radial pulse. If absent, then control any bleeding and prioritize the patient as a priority 1. That make sense? Okay? Perfect. Now we go down to A.
Is there a limit to how long you spend to try to control the bleeding?
Really quick, try to put the tourniquet on or control it. Control it.
Is there a point at which if you can't, you have to move on to the next?
You can't control bleeding, you can't control, we don't waste time. They become priority 1, eventually they'll bleed out and die. We don't want that to happen, but we gotta move on. You know, patients died and we were stuck on 1 person. So, but once you make them a red, we assign that. If we have resources coming in now, they're a red patient. So if you're looking at the whole situation now, it's A's, B's, and C's, right? Walking, ambulatory, perfect airway. B, we talk about breathing, respirations. If it's under 30 a minute, yes, go cap refill. If it's under 2 seconds, can they obey simple commands? Okay, if they cannot obey simple commands, they move over to control bleeding. Move on through priority 1. If they obey simple commands, move over to priority 2. Okay, that makes sense? Any questions at all? I know, we all love flowcharts, right? All right. As far as pediatric triage goes, children are involved in multiple casualty incidents. It does happen. School, right? How many kids are in the Charlotte school? Roughly.
275, something like that.
Right. So, I bring up past experiences that I've had. In the town of Newfield, Maine, right next to Limerick, there's something called the Lion School. It's called the Lion School, right? It's town line. And a janitor kind of screwed up some chemicals and got into the ventilation system. And I had 400 patients that had to be triaged coming out of the school. 400 kids. I went a long time because we wait for all the parents to show up and sign them off. Or release them.
Yeah, we had one to show up.
Yes, who was the triage officer at that?
So something to think about though when you have multiple kids. So the over prioritizing of children will take valuable resources away from more serious injured adults. There's still a patient, triaging. I understand you. Last thing you want to do is walk away from a kid who's going to die, but unfortunately, we've got to move forward, right? And it's one of the worst decisions you're going to have to make, but it's a decision you have to make. And remember, the triage systems that are out there are based on adult physiology and will not really provide accurate triage for kids, which is why they invented the tape. So, and I'm going to bring that for next class. So you have to actually see the pediatric tape.
Can you just say conceptually what's different about it?
It has respiratory rates are different,
So it's
things like that.
modified for people.
Modified repeats. Yep. Maybe breathing for the patient. This is what the tape looks like here. And it's developed by pediatricians. All right. So, here comes the exercise. And what I want you guys to do is kind of let me know. We're going to go right down the room. We're going to go one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, as we go down through. Tony, can you still hear us? Perfect. I enjoy yelling at you, so it's fun. All right, so we're going to start with the exercise. I'll let you know, Tony, when it's your turn, all right?
Sure.
Perfect. All right, Matt, we're going to start with you first.
Okay.
Remember, follow your chart. You're going to give me this one here.
Green.
Okay, Meg, you're next.
Still green.
Okay. If someone has a disagreement, just let us know, and we'll discuss it. All right, Pam, you're up.
Walking. walking is.
Keep
one
looking.
green.
Okay? So the patient can walk, right?
Walking to green.
That's the key word. Over here.
Whose turn is it?
Oh, sorry, Jim, you're up.
Yellow.
Read it.
Excuse me, red.
No.
Where you
We're back?
reposition the
I mean,
airway
if
once.
you're just there and not
There's
reading
no
your
period,
text,
he's
Yeah.
expected.
Ah, dead.
Okay? You're correct. All right, Jenna, you're up.
Red.
Everybody agree? Okay. Okay. All right, Nick.
he's gonna be yellow.
Yellow?
Yep.
They're told to suck it up and start walking?
Mhm.
All right, Rob?
Female 60s fracture left leg cannot walk because of the leg more than. I'm gonna make her green,
Okay.
possibly a yellow, but
Maybe yellow? And when the fractures?
yeah, if it's femur fracture, I definitely go yellow.
Okay.
If not-
Tony, the next one's yours.
Okay.
There you go.
That'd be a red to a black penny.
Black. There.
Black.
Yep,
I think you said
black.
red.
All right,
You're opening the airway that they're still not reading, so that would be black.
fair enough. All right, Matt, you're up.
That is red.
Yeah, so I'd probably look at maybe the expected at this point. Right.
Yeah.
That was
But
red.
going on ours, red. Okay? Meg?
Expectant. Dead.
All right. Cam?
Yeah, look at this, not alert, he's breathing. So that's altered mental status. Yellow.
I go with that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yellow? All right, Jim?
I would put that yellow.
Okay. Jenna?
I'd say red.
All right. Nick?
I would probably put that yellow.
All right, that was the last one. All right, and now to secondary triage. One of the things we're going to do, obviously, is go around again and kind of just go through our assessments and see if anybody changed for the better or worse. So the purpose of this, obviously, is determine among like priority categories, higher priority patients. So what does this happen? Well, generally on the extended duration events, if we have a 10-patient motor vehicle crash, we have patients being taken out of it pretty quickly. Your secondary triage is more of your detailed assessment in the back of the ambulance when you're transporting. Really, if you look at it that way. So obviously, if treatment areas are established, then there will likely be a need for secondary triage. Try not to put the black with the red right next to each other, or greens and blacks next to each other. We want to make sure we keep those areas separated. All right. Remember that if they are deceased, give them some dignity, cover them up. If you have body bags in your meals, give them a body bag for all I can. Just don't leave them out in the open. All right, and then the Glasgow Coma Scale. This is all part of your secondary triage. Remember the Glasgow Coma Scale, right?
Siren does.
Siren does, right? So if I do this and say, give me the 3 categories of the Glasgow Coma Scale. Nick.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right. Give me the 3 categories of the Glasgow Coma Scale.
There's, there's obeys commands appropriately. There's responsive to verbal stimuli. And
You have no idea.
no, I don't.
Fair enough. Anyone else want to help
I
with
went through
that?
the boxes and siren. I'm like, oh yeah, that's about right.
There's
Motor, high movement, and
verbal.
verbal. Perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
So you can. So what's the lowest score you can get in a GCS score?
3,
What's the highest you can get?
15.
I like it. So your motor response is measured from numbers 1 through what?
What's an AMTV? That's one. 6.
6. All right, your verbal is 1 through 5, and your eye movement is 1 to 4. Perfect. These are important for us to know. Right, your water bottle has a GCS.
And GCS, this is 3, and then what's an AMTV?
Now, I like it. Something to add to that, okay, and we don't really talk about revised trauma scores very often, but a lot of times your GCS score will work towards a revised trauma score, which is what you see down here. Okay, based upon your numbers and adding them up into different categories, 12, 11, 10 or less. That can help you out when you're doing your secondary triage, otherwise known as a revised trauma score, or the RTS. So if you look at your elite program, I believe, and I could be mixing this with New Hampshire's, when you put your GCS score in, it comes out as 15 on the bottom. There's another number next to it. That's your revised trauma score. Okay, something that might be helpful. There are some protocols in some states that actually say if your revised trauma score is here, you will transport to this center. Does that help? So tools to help. Use of ICS. We should be utilizing an ICS in every call. We want a simple EMS call. There's still a command. We just don't establish it on the radio, but it's still a command. Right? Using your highest license level or officer that's on the scene. Right? But we still follow ICS and everything that we do. All right, whether we establish an EMS call to a major incident, there's still ICS being done. Follow your SOPs and SOGs. All right, so we have guidelines, procedures, and MCI responses. All right, look at those. If you have them in your protocols and your SOPs and SOGs, look at them. All right, be familiar with what's going on. Command boards are good to have, especially with big incidents. If you have a command board and an ID track, I've used them. I've seen pros and cons with them. So it's up to you if you're trained to use them and you use them frequently. That usually helps. Not so much for tagging in as it should be, but if you have multiple resources coming in, it's good to know who's at staging and what levels you have for paramedics versus A's, and it kind of helps you out with the board. We do run a command board at the fire incidents we do for training. We've had those boards up, really. I've seen those. Years? We had them here. Up there, they had the board with all the people written down on them and what areas. I saw that up there in the training we had.
On what?
The big training we had off Route 7. Fire training we had, the burn.
Oh, yes.
So we had a command board that was there.
Yes.
So be familiar with how those command boards work, especially if you're going to be in that type of role. And even if you're not, have an understanding of it. Because that's kind of how things work. Because you could be the first one there, and you could be stuck setting things up. So those are helpful tools. Communications, radios versus cellular. I know that Nextel used to have a cellular trailer. Used to travel to big disasters, not necessarily up here, but down in the southern states. And they'd have the repeater set right up in the trailer for the phones, and they'd pass them up at major incidents. So, but obviously documentation, document everything. And if you have scribes and runners, that usually helps. Remember that, to summarize, MCIs require a change of EMS provider's approach. It is not the same thing as you do walking into grandma fell down over at the rehab center. Okay? It's not the same approach. Right? It's a different approach as we go into them because we're not using as many resources or as far as establishing patient care. It's a quick down and dirty assessment to move forward to the next patient. So single versus multiple patients, applying limited resources effectively in a timely manner. So remember, you have to use time management through all this. Organizing, coordinating, and communicating EMS operations. It's good for everybody to be on the same page. And then accountability of resources and patients. The last thing you want to do is lose somebody. That's why everything is recorded. An appropriate distribution of destinations. Where are they going and why? The last thing I want to do is send 15 greens to a facility that can handle 6 reds, and they say, well, we can't handle any more because you have 16 greens. Where all beds are taken up. Establish your resources, find out what they can take, send them to the appropriate facility. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Right. And then if you have a big incident, lessons learned after action reviews.
AER.
Huh?
AARs.
Yep.
That's what he's military.
Yep, these are very, very important. But that's the only way you can make it better. We do it after trainings, right? You know, we have an after action review.
An extra safety fun fair.
We did. You know, whenever we had after the fun fair, we had a review here. You know, so it happens. It makes us better the next time it happens. Are we all prepared for an MCI?
As much as anybody else is.
Yeah.
Who
Right.
knows? Who knows?
You know, as much as anybody else could be. All right. Just be ready for it. It could happen anytime. All right. So we're going to kind of go through these here. Any questions at all? I know it's kind of running late tonight.
No questions, but of the ones I've been involved with again, and even trainings as well, the transport officer, number one, needs to have a notepad.
Yeah.
And what I've found, and you were over there at the second one I did over in Moncton, the transport officer tends to focus on the patients coming into the treatment area. Don't worry about that as a transport officer. And what was happening was, as they're coming into the treatment, they're trying to take down their tag numbers. Transport doesn't need to worry about that until they come out of the treatment area to an arriving ambulance.
Yeah.
As they go by the transport officer, that's when the transport officer stops the patient, documents their tag, what color they are, and where they're going.
Or takes a corner of the tag.
Or takes a corner if they had to rip off tags.
Did you ever notice the
And then
MCI tags?
that's
They're all
all the
numbered.
transport officer's got to worry about.
Oh, they are.
So,
Every tag is numbered. So, all right. Well, that's it for the online recording. Tony, you can stay on if you want for a minute.